everyone. I'm Angela Delita, your co-host for the Plant-Based Asia Summit. Now, this afternoon, I am very excited to introduce you to a man who is revolutionizing how social media can be a force for good in the world. Vikas Garg is the founder of Abillion, a social app that is a driver of positive change in food, beauty, and fashion. Today, Vikas will be speaking about how we, as consumers, actually have power to drive change for animal welfare and for sustainability, which, as we all know, is a very hot topic right now, with evidence showing that climate change is unequivocally man-made. Welcome, Vikas. It's so wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you, Angie. That was a really great intro, and I'm delighted to spend some time with you today. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. So I guess we'll jump straight in. Let's start with a bit of background. Could you please tell us a bit about your plant-based journey and how it led to the creation of Abillion?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I started on this journey to go vegan um, back in 2008, and it was just a really interesting time for me. There was a lot of, in a way, upheaval in my life. My parents were sick, and I was learning to kind of cope with that and this new normal of going to the hospital and taking care of my family. And I was in my late 20s, and it was pretty reckless, right? And didn't really didn't really like have a way to feel like I was really connected to my values. I was just struggling. I grew up in New York City, and I was in New York at the time, and I happened to decide that, hey, I wanted to go vegan, and it was a number of different factors. My mom and dad, and myself, we grew up vegetarian. I grew up vegetarian since birth, but our sort of American version of the Indian vegetarian diet was, super, super heavy with things like dairy and cheese and, all the bad stuff that we now today know to be bad, right? In terms of hormones and cholesterols and saturated fat and all of these things. But back then there was really no knowledge of it. And it was really when my mother got breast cancer and my father got heart disease and I had to have a massive, massive operation that I really started to look into the role that nutrition and food had in our otherwise seemingly healthy, do everything everybody's telling us that we're supposed to be doing kind of lifestyle. And that was really eye-opening for me, especially the bit on dairy. I wasn't a meat consumer. I never ate meat until that time, but dairy was usually prevalent in my life. And it was just something that I really looked at and said, wow, okay, this is something maybe I want to see how I can remove this from my lifestyle. So that was the beginning. It was a real journey. It was really hard. Um, and it wasn't easy, because 2008, 2009. And even going from being vegetarian to vegan was really hard for me, right? Like all the things that I grew up loving, pizzas and pastas and, Indian food with paneer and all this stuff, I suddenly couldn't eat that anymore, right? And then, of course, the lifestyle extended way beyond just being, just being plant-based in terms of the food, but also just being a lot more conscious about all of the sort of decisions as I was making as a person and as a consumer. So cutting out the leather and thinking about how I travel and all of these different things. So that was the beginning of the journey. It was really felt very sacrificial and felt like a huge compromise. I felt socially ostracized often. And, a lot of it, it's food is such a big part of our cultural tradition. It's how we socialize, and all of that, that it just really felt like, wow, this is a huge sacrifice. Along the way, I'd say it probably took me 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, right? But along the way, it went from being this sacrifice and this compromise to being this extraordinarily inspiring and empowering and enabling thing that I became really proud of in my 30s. And I really look at I just turned 40 earlier this year. And so I really look at my 30s as really when the light switch went on for me in many ways. And I started to make much better decisions for myself. And I moved from New York City to California. And then from California, I moved to Singapore. It's been 6, 7 years since we got here. And and through that, like, this has been a way for me to really think about like implement my values and practice my values consciously day in, day out, with the most basic of decisions, what I eat, right? And and so I wanted to bring people closer to that. I wanted to build something. When I decided, the kind of company that I wanted to create, I really felt that if I could help more people around the world sort of get situated and enter this lifestyle and not feel like it's a hurdle and a compromise and a sacrifice, but really just point them and direct them to options that are available out there, and then really help to really build this sort of networking ecosystem where there's more and more options around the planet for them, that that would be a really, really great thing to do. So that, in a nutshell, is Abillion. It's partly social media. It's a consumer review app. So all of our content is user generated. So it's really has that authentic community feel. And the community just helps everybody live more sustainably wherever you are. So whether you're a meat eater that's looking to swap out a meal maybe once a day or once a week, or you might be that very passionate vegan, right? We're this very welcoming community that kind of brings the whole experience of being plant-based together for everybody around the planet.
I see. So it's really your personal journey led to the starting of Abillion, which I think is such a nice story. So can you please tell us, how does the app work and what your mission is?
Yeah, so our mission is to build a global community that makes sustainability a habit for everyone, right? And we think food is a great place to start, because if you can inject some sense of values and purpose and inspire somebody to make small changes to the way that they eat, that just builds right from there. Because food is a thing that we all do as human beings every single day, multiple times a day, right? And it's a big unifying thing in our identity as human beings. More so than the travel that we might do every now and then, or the products that we might buy every now and then. Food is every day, right? And I think that the closest thing to that, in terms, is for many people will resonate, is the plastic straw, right? It's swapping out that plastic straw for whether it's a bamboo straw or a metal straw or a glass straw or just something, and keeping that in your bag, right? It's not so much about the plastic you're saving, but it's about that consciousness that decision then creates and how that permeates through the rest of your lifestyle. So for us, the app is really simple. For a new user, for somebody who's joining the community for the first time, what they do is, they might click the map, they might search for a product, they might be looking up for a category, they might be interested in clean beauty. And what we do is we point them in the direction of, great products and of highly rated brands and products that are rated by people around the world. So it's really consumer reviews and what people are saying about these things. And it all lives on the platform. We help people find food at restaurants around the planet. And we're not just talking about vegan restaurants or vegetarian restaurants, but at any kind of restaurant. I can tell you just personal story is one of the best vegan salads that I've ever eaten anywhere in the world is at a steakhouse in New York City on 57th Street. So, vegan food can exist everywhere, right? Plant-based food can be great and should be great everywhere. In fact, I always like to say it should be the best thing on the menu. So that's really what we're trying to do, is point people in the direction of great options. So on this journey, they feel more inspired, they feel more enabled, they feel like it's not so hard, right? And then we back that up with the community element, and people post things. And one of the really unique things that we do is really support this idea of making this one small conscious choice a day, right? If you make this one choice, right, which is whether it's to eat something plant-based or the next product you buy for it to be sustainable or ethically made, you just take a photo of it, just like you do on Instagram or on Facebook, right? You take a photo of it. Soon you'll be able to take a video, right, of your experience, but you take a photo of it, you post it, and boom, that creates, like, let's say we're sitting here in Singapore, that actually creates a donation credit for you to then donate to a local animal sanctuary or an organization that's feeding hungry children in Africa, or planting trees around the world, or educating girls, educating school children in places like India and Nepal. And so we're really trying to build this platform where the consciousness around the choices that you make have a knock-on effect. We know they have a knock-on effect, but we want to bring that effect and that impact closer to people. And that's kind of, we've built the whole user experience around this, creating this kind of impact. And I'm really happy to say that since we started the company, we've donated nearly $1 million to fund impact around the world with some of the, with some of the world's leading small, medium, and big organizations that are driving impact for people, for the planet, for animals, for food inequities, and tackling these kinds of issues.
That's fantastic, Vikas. Congratulations. I can't believe nearly $1 million. That's really fantastic. Oh, wow. And I resonated with what you said. Food is every day. I think it's something that many people probably don't even maybe realize, right? It is the simplest thing that we can do to change. So let's talk about the actual environmental impact. Do you know
Sure.
the environmental impacts of a meat eater versus a plant meat eater, and how are they different?
Sure. So, for those that are watching, I imagine everybody has seen kind of articles and, the side of packaging of products that you're buying, showing the differences. So, it's truly amazing if we just look at the concept of eating meat. Eating meat is killing the planet. And it's the way that we're eating meat, it's the way that meat is being produced that is killing the planet, right? And it's very different from how meat maybe was consumed 150 years ago, where, I talked to friends in Malaysia and Indonesia who was telling me that their great grandparents say that they might have eaten an egg once a month, right? Or, they might have eaten meat once a month or a couple of times a year because it just wasn't so prevalent, right? And even the same thing with dairy is if you talk to my grandmother in India, or I remember growing up and, go to my grandmother's house and like occasionally on a special occasion, we might be served a little bit of paneer, right? Which is, Indian cheese. So but today, if you go to any Indian restaurant anywhere on the planet, half the menu has paneer on it, right? And so it's just we have gone from we've gone to one extreme in a way that wasn't kind of always the case. And it's the funny thing is this hasn't been going on. If you look at our history across millions of years as people, this has only been going on for a very short period of time. And it's coincided with the industrialization of everything, right, on the planet. And today we're taking a step back from that industrialization, whether it's by driving electric cars, right, or improving our public transportation infrastructure. And with food, it's sort of the same thing. Food is next. Food is happening now, right? So what is the impact, right? So the way that we consume food, or the way that we consume meat, when it adds up, it's the largest single source of global greenhouse gas emissions. The entire global transportation sector, so that's all planes, trains, buses, boats, ships, automobiles, mopeds. I don't know what else, right? Like pretty much you get the idea. Everything that moves that's machine operated, right? You add up all of the greenhouse gas emissions from all of those petrol, gasoline fired vehicles, right? And meat and animal agriculture presents a larger amount of global greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis. That's crazy, right? The other thing is deforestation. Out here in Asia, we commonly talk about palm oil, right? From the perspective of deforestation. And of course, we all know that palm oil is a huge factor, is a huge part of sort of the global deforestation equation. But the funny thing is, going back to, if you look at what are the largest sources of deforestation globally, palm oil is actually the third. Number one is animal agriculture, and specifically cattle. Number two, guys, is soy. Right? Now, this is often cited by the meat industry as like, well, tofu's not great for you either. Look at tofu's a number. It's actually such a false representation, because 93% of soy that's produced around the world, which is the number two cause of deforestation, is actually not consumed by humans. Humans only consume 7% of the soy that's produced. The rest of it goes to feed the number one source of deforestation globally, which is cattle, right? Because you got to feed the cattle. And here's the irony of all of that. Did you ever meet a cow that was grazing on tofu? Right? It doesn't happen. So it's not, soy is actually not part of an animal, a cow's natural diet. And what we are doing, going back to my mother at breast cancer, what we are doing by feeding not only this habitat destruction, which has massive implications for wildlife, right? And we've seen the degradation of wildlife globally, but by rearing all of this cattle and feeding it all of this soy, what's happened, right, is the incidence of bacteria and viruses that these animals then are transmitting to us, or hormones rather, that they're transmitting to us through the dairy that we consume. So when you take a cow, a lactating cow, which is, a cow that's pregnant or has just given birth, and you milk it, those stress hormones, right, that are then going into the milk are being consumed by us. And that has nothing to do with antibiotics or, when somebody says, oh, my milk is organic, like that doesn't mean anything. That this is like, if you're feeding a cow soy, one of the things that the cow is doing is the cow is developing a form of leukemia, right? And this leukemia, which bovine leukemia, is being transmitted to women in the form of breast cancer. And so in America, where they've actually been doing studies now for the last 10, 15 years, it's been amazing to see the linkages now that science is making between breast cancer, female breast cancer in human beings, and the link that 40% of breast cancer cases in controlled studies in America have found that 40% of breast cancer cases are connected to bovine leukemia, right? Where there's antibodies present in those people for bovine leukemia. So it's really, look, it's fascinating. There's a huge environmental impact to all of this, but there's also a huge societal impact and a human health issue that is often overlooked, right? But it's all super, super, super connected. And the reason it's overlooked is because we have grown up to think of these things as good for us, right? Protein, calcium, all of this stuff that's marketed to us. And so I think when you peel back the onion, it's really amazing what you find. And that so we've got the land issue, we've got the deforestation issue. And then of course we've got things like water. You've got to feed all of these animals a ton of water, right? That's also really unsustainable. And then the financial unsustainability of all of it. 80% of the world's antibiotics are manufactured for the animal agriculture industry, injecting these animals so they can live in confined spaces and they can grow really big, right? They can grow a lot of muscle, fat tissue, whatever people consume. And that also obviously has a massive impact from a sustainability perspective. Those resources, those financial resources, those manufacturing resources, all of that soy that's being created could feed the 1 billion people who won't have dinner tonight, right? Who won't be eating today. There's a billion hungry people that are malnourished around the planet. And there's a billion obese people, right, who live off of animal proteins. And so there's a huge sustainability from a sustainability perspective. I'd say from the environment, it's also about, what is the environment that we are creating for our own human population within that population.
Wow, thank you, Vikas. There's some really shocking statistics there. Actually, very good ammo to have if anyone says that soy actually contributes more to deforestation. But actually, like you said, 92% is going towards animal agriculture to feed the actual the protein, I guess you would say. So thank you for sharing that. So I guess the attendees today would want to know, so what can we as consumers actually do to drive change for the environment, for animal welfare? Maybe you have a personal experience where you've actually seen change happen as a result of consumer intervention.
Oh, for sure. So many examples, and just your first part of your question, Angie, right around what people can do. So look, you might come from a family where you're living at home, and everybody eats the same thing, right? So it's, while it would be amazing if you're sitting here today, or through these series of talks, if you make the decision that, hey, I want to go plant-based, I want to go vegan, or if it's not that decision, it doesn't have to be black and white, right? It's not one or the other. But there's, even if it's that consciousness that, hey, one day a week or 1 month a year, right? Or just more regularly, I'm going to really try this, or for lunch every day, right? That makes a big decision, right? And that makes a big impact. And so that right there is a big decision and makes a really, really big impact. In terms of just where we see like this going, right, is the more people who order this stuff, right, the more businesses cater to it. I can tell you, like, I mean, my own personal journey, right, is I was a banker. I was like an investment banker in New York. And so ironically, even though I was vegan, I used to have to take my clients who were coming from other parts of the United States to visit, and we were working on deals. Guess what? People come from Minnesota or Texas, and they want to go to steakhouses in New York City. Or maybe the people from Texas, they think their steak is better. But like the reality is that, like, people want to go to the restaurants that people want to go to, right? So for me, I was like, oh, I always used to have these conversations with the managers, these owners, anyone I can speak with, the waiters at restaurants, and try to, tell them, it's like, hey, look, like, I'm happy to keep coming here. I'm happy to come back here. I'm happy to come here and spend a lot of money entertaining all these people and whatnot. But I don't want them to feel that I'm like this freak who is like eating a salad or eating some like whatever bunch of sides. Like, you've got the spinach and the heirloom tomatoes and the asparagus, and boom, that's my meal. There's nothing wrong with that, but I really wanted people to feel like what I was eating was the best thing at the table. Because you go to a steakhouse, you eat steak. Most people never think that there's something else that they could eat at a steakhouse, right? And so I used to always have that conversation. And because businesses saw that I was voting with my dollar, with my wallet, they actually, in a place like New York City, they said, okay, sure. And they put their best foot forward, right? And so that was the kind of, in a way, door-to-door activism, right? And we've extended that through our platform, where every single time a review is posted on Abillion, our goal is to get it back to the business owner. And we don't just stop there. We send them their competitors' reviews to show them that, hey, like, what's the best rated vegan Japanese dish in New York? And we'll send that to a restaurant in Tokyo, because we'll say, hey, look, this is how easy it is. Let's make this easier for you, right? To actually change and switch out. And so I think that when you talk about a really big macro goal of the world becoming more sustainable and plant-based, it's also important for us to then think about what the micro is. It's like, how are we going to actually effectuate that change? There's consumers, and then there's businesses, and they all feed off of each other. Yeah, just a really interesting story. I talk to our members every week. I talk to a couple of people and do some early morning calls with folks in Canada and the US and all of that. And, one of the nicest calls that I've had recently in the last few months that made me feel really proud and happy about what we're doing and the change that's happening, right? And how it's all connected. It's not just us, it's all connected, right? Is one of our users for those of you that know Canada and the western part of Canada, Vancouver Island, which is this huge island off the coast of Vancouver. She lives there, and we support a local animal sanctuary there. And she just happened to take her kids to visit, to see the animals, right? To see farm animals. And she was appalled by what she saw, or heard rather, about what animals really go through. And she said, okay, how do I do my part? And the owner of this sanctuary actually recommended our app. They said, this can just help you when you're out and about, find vegan options. And, by posting content here, you actually can support us because this company donates money to us, right? And so, every time you eat something vegan. And so a year and a half ago, Mary and her two kids and her husband were like total carnivores. They went to this sanctuary. They decided that they wanted to reduce their meat consumption. They got on Abillion. They started finding options around them that they'd never seen before. And they started going and experiencing. They didn't know that they could have a meal without meat. which is kind of, it's crazy for somebody like me to think that, but like they really just felt that, right? And so they continued and continued. And then Mary started looking at what our members in Singapore and the rest of Asia are doing. And her family got inspired to try making Asian food for the first time. Right. And so now you've got this Canadian family living on this island off the coast of Vancouver, making like local, Singaporean and Asian dishes and discovering food, rediscovering food. Right. And I think it's the same thing. So, in the last year, her entire family has gone 100% plant-based. And there's so many little things that, happen to support that, is a visit to the sanctuary and using our platform and connecting with other people and experiencing what options exist, right? And starting to kind of just foray into cooking. And so I think it's just like, it's amazing to see that kind of transformation that's possible. And it's just about figuring out how to take that first step, right? It's that onboarding problem. It's that thing that we call in tech, we call it the cold start problem, which is how do you just get somebody tuned in and hooked, a little hook and the hook is probably a bad analogy, actually, sorry. But like, how do you get, somebody like to just start taking notice and start trying something? And then how do you make that really great for them? And we've seen a lot of that happen and happening. And I think, and then just one more statistic, just to bring it to Singapore, when we first started in 2017, we started sending out all of this data to all these restaurants, right? People were starting to post on our platform. And at the end of 2017, we found that Singapore restaurant community had like about 1,000 vegan dishes across the whole island, 1,000, 100% plant-based dishes. Today, there's 20,000 plant-based dishes in just the span of 4 years, basically. There's 20,000 100% plant-based vegan dishes on the Abillion platform right here in Singapore. And I'm excited because, look, I mean, we do a lot of hard work, but I think reality is it's just that like there's so many interventions and things that are taking place that are getting business owners to see this as an opportunity to present their business as, oh, we care about sustainability, oh, we care about people's health, right? Oh, we want our consumers to feel happy. It kind of feels to some degree like the gluten-free movement that's been going on kind of before this, right? Where everybody kind of business owners started to rush to create gluten-free options.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So I guess the first thing attendees should do is download, if they haven't already, download Abillion and start taking pictures of the meals that they're having in restaurants, the products that they're using, because it's also fashion and beauty, isn't it? Because it's not just food.
Yeah, and recently we launched a big feature recently that we rolled out. We call it just posts, right? And it's not just about a consumer review anymore. You can post about anything. You can take a photo of the sky and post it if you wish. But the idea is really how do you provide this sort of this framework, this platform to have conversations about sustainability. And so, I mean, we've seen users post photos of meat and say, hey, like, I just really love this. What do you think the options are for me? Or, I'd love to see somebody create something like my mom's favorite, whatever. Right. And so that's also, just a big part of rounding out the whole platform. And we're going to be launching videos soon. So a lot of people are starting to post recipes, and it's just, and eventually we're going to get to the stage where you're going to be able to buy a lot of the products that you see on our platform. So you have a lot of exciting things coming out.
I'm excited for that. So it really is, it's kind of like, it's an Instagram of the plant-based world. That's how it kind of, I would sum it up, right? People are actually sharing things that it's actually causing a good impact rather than, no impact at all. You're actually making change. So it's really fantastic. Now, you were talking about how your experience happened in the US. And, as we know, a lot of the plant-based movement is happening more UK, US, Europe. So what kind of shifts can we expect to see here in Asia Pacific over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so we're already seeing a really big shift, right? Relative to where we were a few years ago. I've been here for 6.5 years. And when I first got here, it was pretty hard. And it's been great to see the shift. We're also seeing companies get set up here in Singapore and in Hong Kong, and even in places like Jakarta, whether it's restaurants or it's plant-based food brands, making products. And it's really, really exciting. And then we're seeing really interesting product being created out of discard, like waste product. So people are using banana leaves to make leather, right? And they're using pineapple to make leather, and they're using mushrooms to make leather. And so it's really, really fascinating, like what is actually, because all of that from an agricultural perspective exists out here in places like Malaysia and Indonesia. So we're seeing a lot of growth in companies in the region that are actually building these solutions. And that's super exciting because it really is this global movement that is forming, and you don't know where the next really successful company is going to come from. It doesn't have to be the U.S. And it's interesting because when I look at a product like the Impossible Burger, just on the Abillion app, there's more than 12,000 plant-based meat products around the world that have been reviewed by people. So the Impossible Burger is one of those, right? Now it's one that we all know and hear about, and there's a few other companies like that. But that's really, I'd say that it's amazing to see how many companies are being built here locally, and the kind of talent that is going into those companies, right? So that's exciting. It's also great to see the governments and the fund managers, the investors, kind of start to take stock and appreciate that. So that's one. Two, it's like there's this rise. We wrote a report a couple of, like, 2 months back, 3 months back, alongside Enterprise Singapore, which was the rise of the flexitarian in Singapore. And it's been really interesting because when people fill out their user profiles on our app after they download it, they can select whether they're a carnivore or, a pescatarian or a vegetarian or a vegan or plant-based or a flexitarian. And we've seen a huge spike in the number of people who historically would have identified themselves as, let's say, carnivore, but are now increasingly identifying as flexitarian, which is funnily because it's not like the I don't know, it's not like the coolest word ever, flexitarian, but for a lot of people, they now have a negative association with being called meat eaters. They're actually like, no, I eat meat. Yes, I eat meat, and I'm not ashamed of eating meat. But I am trying to consciously reduce my meat consumption because I understand that there's a health angle, a sustainability angle, a social equity angle, right? And I care about those things. I'm not an asshole, right? And so there's people who are, identifying that, well, I'm not an omnivore anymore. So we've seen a huge spike there. I don't remember the exact number, but it was like a 3x increase in the last 2 years just here in Singapore with the number of users that we see on our platform identifying as such. So that's exciting, and I think that trend is going to continue. It's actually, I think that it's still, we're in the very early innings, so I think it's going to actually grow exponentially from here.
Oh, that's good to know. Do you think the pandemic has impacted the plant-based movement at all?
Of course. I mean, it goes without saying. I think that, well, we're all stuck at home, so we're all like sharing information and looking at information. I think that there's a lot of movements brewing globally. There's the global sourdough movement, right? Like everybody's making sourdough bread and posting photos of it online, including, I'm guilty of it as well. But of course, it's helped because I think that people are recognizing that things like COVID, right, are very, very intertwined with habitat destruction, with our encroachment on wildlife, right? If you look at, like, I mean, one of the dominant theories about how this all started is that it started in a wildlife wet market in Wuhan in China, And whether you believe that or you believe something else, right? Like, I'm not going to go there. But the reality is that whether it's MERS or SARS or Ebola or the hantavirus or Black Death and plague 500 years ago or HIV, it's all started because people are mess around with animals. People mess around with habitat, right? And wildlife. And that's got to stop, right? So today, now we have this whole debate and dialogue around whether people should be vaccinated or not. We have all of this, all of this division in society. But we now also know, and I think that because of the events of the last year and a half and just how global the scale has been, like, look, prior to last year, just the year before, in 2019 and 2018, we had something called African swine fever. And China had to cull and kill 600 million pigs, right? So that's, you've had like, but African swine fever in a way wasn't this global pandemic that then affected us people the same way, right? It was killing off animals. And so this was, I think, we live in a generation now where, because of the digital 24/7 nature of of our lives, information is spreading quickly, and we've really seen the impact that this virus has had on humanity. And I think it's been a wake-up call for a lot of people. And I think that maybe that is in one way a silver lining, that this pandemic has really caused a lot of people to rethink and assess the way that they consume and live.
It's a good way to see it, Vikas, as a silver lining. Yeah. So things are changing because of it. Thank you for sharing that. And this brings us to our final question. What would you say is the one thing a person can do to take control of their lives, their health, and their impact in the world? And that's a big one, but I'm sure you've got some good insight into this.
Oh, I have this little weird habit, and I start off by saying that I'm not perfect at it, and you probably would expect me to say, like, go vegan or go plant-based, and that's an obvious one. And probably because this is the plant-based summit, like, there's probably going to be 100 speakers that are going to tell you that. So maybe I'll just offer something else for the listeners. It was really interesting, like 9 years ago, I read this book, and it was about mindfulness, right? And it was written by a Buddhist monk. His name is Lama Surya Das, and he's actually American, but he spent a lot of time in Nepal, and he talks about this practice that the Dalai Lama does. And I took it away from that book, and at first I just thought, okay, this is like so silly, like, I'm never going to do this. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to like try doing this for a day and see how I feel. And so the practice is really simple. Like, what the Dalai Lama does is whenever he sees something, anything living, it could be an insect, any sentient sort of life. Like, it could be an insect, it could be a cow, it could be a person walking down the street, right? He just takes a moment in his head to say, bless you, right? And that's it, just to offer a nice thought, in a way, to that person. He finds that by that person or that thing, right? And he finds that by doing that, it makes him happy, because he's offered praise, he's offered something nice to someone else for no reason, like, just besides the fact that you're kind of crossing paths, right? And so I was like, all right, this is interesting, let me try it. And I started doing it, and I just was like, wow, like, I feel like happy, I feel like happier, I feel more connected to life and the earth, I feel more cognizant about all forms of life. And it made me feel really good, with me giving up nothing for it, right? And it's like a personal thing. So it's like, I don't even really have, like, I don't have to tell people this and they look at me, before I never used to tell people. Now I tell people you should try this because I really feel that it's really, really impactful. So, I've been trying this and practicing it, and I do this on my morning runs when I'm able to go for a run. And it's great, whether it's an ant or it's like a cat or any sort of, a person, I'll just in my head, I say, God bless you. Right. Because I'm not blessing that person. Right. Whereas maybe the Dalai Lama is blessing people. Right. Like that's his job, maybe to bless people. My job. And so I say, God bless you. Right. And I don't even think it's about whether you believe in God or not, but I just think it's a nice thing. Maybe you can find another nice thing to say is like, like, I don't know, maybe you could say you look nice or something. Right. But like, I have found that to be really instrumental in shaping my perspective. And a really, really, really great habit that is easy to do and transformative and makes me a much happier, more connected, and more mindful person.
That's really beautiful, because something as simple as blessing people and animals can really make such a change. I was expecting you to say go plant-based, so it's nice to it's nice for you to share something a little bit more mindful, a mindful habit that we can each do every day to make a change. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being here today, Vikas.
I think we're hiring quite a
Okay.
lot all the time, so please look up our jobs, and if you think you've got skills and talents that can help us grow, we'd love to hear from you. Sorry,
That's
Angie.
awesome.
I just
No worries,
shameless
it's all
plug for
good.
my jobs. It's hard to hire people, man. So
Yeah, it's like definitely can imagine. So there you go. Abillion is expanding. So if you're looking to get into a space that you're actually creating positive impact, you got to contact Vikas. So thank you again, Vikas. Thank you so much for your time, and I really look
thanks,
forward to
Angie.
seeing how your platform grows over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon, Angie. Bye.